The words, when he finally spoke them, weren't shouted, nor were they whispered in a moment of intimate, shared despair. No, they were delivered with a chillingly cool, detached certainty, a clinical precision that sliced through the mundane morning air of our perfectly kept kitchen like a surgeon's scalpel. At 45, Evelyn, Daniel said, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me, perhaps into the swirling depths of his coffee mug, as if the convenient truth he'd concocted resided there. You've become a chapter I'm finished reading. A comfortable, predictable story I know by heart and, frankly, no longer find interesting. My husband of 22 years. The man for whom I had cheerfully, even enthusiastically, bypassed 2 significant career promotions, shaping my own burgeoning professional life around his volatile, yet ultimately soaring, trajectory. The father of our son, James, a bright, compassionate young man we had painstakingly guided from scraped knees and childhood dreams to a successful apartment and a promising nascent career. The co-inhabitant of this beautiful home, which I had meticulously built, brick by emotional brick, from a mere blueprint into a sanctuary, a haven for our family. And now, at 45, he had decided he needed a brand new story altogether. He had traded me, his perfectly bound, trusted first edition, for a younger, glossier version, Chloe, a woman with a brighter, more alluring cover and, undoubtedly, far fewer pages of life experience. And then, with an audacity that still makes my blood run cold, he moved her right into the library I had built, into the life I had curated. They, Daniel and his dazzling new muse, thought I would simply fade away. A forgotten character, relegated to the dusty archives of his past, destined to be exiled to some sad, small apartment, a quiet, unremarkable end to a narrative he'd outgrown. They expected me to close the book quietly, to vanish without a trace. But they made one critical, catastrophic mistake, a blunder so profound it would rewrite their own futures. They forgot that I, Evelyn Hayes, still held the pen, and I was about to write an epilogue so devastating, so utterly unforeseen, they would never see it coming. To truly grasp the breathtaking depth of this betrayal, this almost theatrical dismissal, one must first understand the bedrock upon which our life together was so diligently built. It wasn't merely a marriage in the traditional sense. It was, as I now saw with crystal clarity, a deeply unequal merger. A complex, often unspoken, agreement where I had willingly, even eagerly at times, diluted my own shares, suppressed my own ambitions for the perceived greater good of our joint enterprise. The memory of that pivotal day still resonated with a clarity that felt like a fresh, stinging wound, despite the passage of 14 long years. I was 31, a rising star, a woman with a keen mind for numbers and an innate ability to connect with people in the commercial lending department of a reputable regional bank. My boss, a kind, wise, old-school banker named Mr. Henderson, whose office always smelled faintly of aged paper and the crisp, invigorating promise of new opportunity, had called me in. He offered me the branch manager position at our most profitable location. This wasn't just a job. It was the promotion I had been working towards for a decade, the culmination of countless late nights hunched over ledgers, weekends spent studying industry trends, and stellar performance reviews that consistently lauded my dedication and acumen. My heart had swelled with a mixture of pride and exhilarating anticipation. This was it. My moment. My ascent. That very same week, Daniel, whose sales job was a notoriously volatile roller coaster ride of exhilarating high commissions followed by terrifying dry spells and demoralizing rejections, had been given a new territory. This new venture, while promising greater potential earnings, also required an even more demanding, almost constant, travel schedule. Our son, James, was a vibrant 3-year-old then, a whirlwind of boundless energy, perpetually scraped knees, and innocent questions that demanded constant presence and attention. That night, over a dinner of my homemade lasagna, a dish Daniel always claimed was his favorite, I shared my news, my voice buzzing with unrestrained excitement, my eyes sparkling with the vision of our shared, bright future. Daniel smiled, a practiced, almost reflexive curve of his lips, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. There was a subtle tension around them, a shadow I chose to ignore in my euphoria, my eagerness to believe in our shared dream. "That's fantastic, Evelyn," he'd said, swirling the deep red wine in his glass, the ruby liquid catching the dining room light. "Truly. But who will be home for James? With me on the road so much, he needs stability. Someone has to be the anchor." The anchor. The word resonated with a profound, almost biblical sense of noble purpose. I pictured myself as the unwavering, steady heart of our burgeoning family, the firm, unyielding ground upon which he and James could confidently build their lives, reaching for their own sky-high aspirations. I envisioned my strength as foundational, essential. What I didn't see, not then, blinded by love and a desire for harmonious domesticity, was the subtle, yet increasingly restrictive, nature of that role, a gilded cage, exquisitely crafted. I turned down the promotion. I remember the exact phrasing I used to Mr. Henderson, a carefully rehearsed line, "I need to prioritize my family right now." I saw the flicker of disappointment, a momentary shadow, in his otherwise kind eyes, a look that would, in moments of quiet solitude in the years to come, return to haunt me, a silent reproach. I shifted to a less demanding role within the bank, my career path leveling off into a flat, predictable plateau, while Daniel's, unburdened by domestic responsibilities, soared. His triumphs were financed, in no small part, by my steady paycheck and my unwavering, often invisible, support at home. My anchors were his wings. A decade later, fate, or perhaps simply the relentless march of time and its cruelties, decreed it was my turn to be the anchor once more. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, a woman of formidable pride and an equally formidable will, fell gravely ill. Her mind, a labyrinth of sharp memories and unyielding opinions, remained incisively keen, but her body was failing her, slowly, inexorably. She flatly refused to go into a nursing facility, declaring it a place where old people go to die forgotten. "She can stay with us," I had offered, because that's what a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, did. It was an offer born of duty and a genuine desire to alleviate suffering, but it was also a testament to my ingrained role as the default caregiver, the silent problem solver. For 2 grueling years, our guest room, once a cheerful space filled with light, transformed into a hushed hospice. I learned to change bedpans with practiced efficiency, to administer medication with gentle precision, to listen to the same well-worn stories and grievances over and over again, always with a patient smile fixed upon my lips, even when my own soul ached. Daniel was, predictably, often on the road, leaving me to handle the long, emotionally draining nights alone. I vividly recall one particular night, the air thick with Eleanor's cries of terrible pain, a sound that would tear through the stillness. I was up with her until 3 a.m., holding her frail hand, humming the same old hymns she loved until her restless body finally drifted off into a fragile sleep. When I crept back to my own bed, utterly exhausted, my limbs heavy with fatigue, Daniel was sound asleep beside me, not having heard a thing, utterly oblivious. He never asked about the details of those nights. He simply registered that things were handled, that his life continued with minimal disruption, and he was grateful. Or so I thought. This level of comfortable ignorance, I would soon discover, was a weapon. The end of my world as I knew it, the quiet implosion of all I had painstakingly built, began at that same sturdy oak kitchen table. It was a Tuesday in April, a deceptively cheerful spring morning, the kind that whispers false promises and lulls you into believing that nothing could ever possibly go wrong. The sunlight slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, oblivious to the impending cataclysm. That table, scarred with the faint rings of countless coffee cups and the barely visible indentations from James's childish scrawls, had been the silent witness to our entire life together. It was where I'd patiently helped a 7-year-old James with his multiplication tables, his small brow furrowed in earnest concentration. It was where I'd planned countless birthday parties, meticulously balanced our checkbooks down to the last penny, celebrating small financial victories and bracing for larger expenses. It was where I'd held Daniel's hand, offering silent, unwavering support when he was laid off from his first firm, his face pale with fear and uncertainty. It was where we'd celebrated James's college acceptances with triumphant shouts and champagne toasts, and mourned the quiet, dignified passing of our parents with shared tears and comforting embraces. Now, in a chilling twist of fate, it was about to become a crime scene. He couldn't look at me, of course. That would have required a spine, a moral courage he clearly lacked in that moment. He just stared, unseeing, into the depths of his steaming coffee mug, as if the swirling steam held the answers, the flimsy justifications he couldn't form himself. His knuckles were white where he gripped the ceramic. "Evelyn," he said, my name feeling foreign and rough, almost a stranger's utterance, in his mouth after so many years of easy endearments of honey or babe. "This isn't easy to say. I think we've run our course." Run our course? The phrase hung in the air, an insult thinly veiled as a polite euphemism. Like we were a limited-time subscription he was canceling, a utility he no longer needed, not a living, breathing marriage woven together with a million shared moments, quiet intimacies, and profound sacrifices, most of them, I now realized, mine. The conversation, if one could even dignify it with such a term, was a blur of corporate speak and empty platitudes. He talked about divergent paths, a phrase that felt absurdly clinical for two lives so intertwined. He spoke of personal growth, as if my decades of nurturing and stability had somehow stunned his. He prattled on about the need to find his own happiness, a pursuit that apparently necessitated shattering mine. He never once said he was sorry. Not a single, genuine apology. He never once admitted there was someone else, though the truth of it hung heavy in the air, palpable as the scent of brewing coffee. He just made it sound like I was a project he had diligently completed, a stock that had matured and was now being efficiently divested from his meticulously managed portfolio. I sat there, stunned into a silence so profound I could literally hear the low, persistent hum of the refrigerator, a mundane soundtrack to my unraveling world. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to throw the heavy ceramic sugar bowl at his head, to demand an immediate, itemized accounting of the 22 years I had unreservedly invested in him. But I did nothing. I was utterly paralyzed by the sheer, stunning arrogance of it all. I, Evelyn Hayes, had been deemed obsolete. He said he needed space to figure things out, a euphemism that grated on my raw nerves. By the end of the month, he was gone. He packed 2 surprisingly small suitcases, a meager representation of his entire adult life, and left with the kind of brisk, almost clinical efficiency that screamed this was a move he had been planning, meticulously and for a long, long time. There was no lingering look, no hesitation, just a crisp closing of the front door. The first few weeks of my new, solitary life were a thick, suffocating fog of shock and grief. The sprawling 4-bedroom house, once a beacon of warmth and laughter, now felt cavernous and hostile, every empty room an echoing testament to my perceived failure. The silence was the worst part. A deep, humming silence, broken only by the rhythmic, relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound I had never truly noticed before, but which now reverberated like a mournful countdown to my own lonely demise. I would wake up in the middle of our large, empty bed, my hand instinctively reaching for him out of sheer, deeply ingrained habit, only for my fingers to land on the cold, undisturbed sheets. I wandered the halls like a ghost in my own home, a phantom of the woman who had poured her soul into these walls. This was rock bottom. Or so I thought. One Saturday, driven by a primal need for basic sustenance, the refrigerator disturbingly empty, I forced myself to go to the grocery store. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, too stark, the cheerful music too jarringly out of sync with my internal symphony of despair. I was pushing my cart down the cereal aisle, trying to remember what it felt like to shop for one, to plan meals for a singular existence, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Evelyn. My goodness, I haven't seen you in ages. Where's Daniel? It was Brenda, a woman from the neighborhood, a friendly acquaintance with whom we had shared countless backyard barbecues, laughter echoing under summer skies, our kids playing together. The question, so innocent, so simple, was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. My vision blurred. I managed a weak, trembling smile and mumbled something about him being on a long business trip, a flimsy lie that tasted like bitter ash in my mouth. I fled the store, abandoning my half-full cart in the aisle, leaving a trail of quiet shame, and cried the entire way home, the steering wheel slick beneath my trembling fingers. I was an object of pity. The poor, abandoned wife. The forgotten chapter. Little did they know, this chapter was about to become a thriller. The phone calls with James were strained, painful affairs, heavy with unspoken truths. He was 21 now, a good, kind kid with a gentle heart, navigating his own nascent career and apartment life in the city. He was caught mercilessly in the crossfire of his parents' implosion. I don't want to choose a side, Mom, he'd plead, his voice heavy with a burden no child should ever have to carry. Please don't make me. I told him he didn't have to, that I would never ask him to. But we both knew, in the chilling clarity of betrayal, that sides had already been chosen, implicitly, by the very nature of his father's actions. He loved me, I knew that deeply, but he was undeniably afraid of his father's disapproval, a fear Daniel had subtly, skillfully cultivated in him since he was a small boy, a quiet threat woven into the fabric of their relationship. He'd call and ask how I was, and I'd lie and say I was fine, trying desperately to protect him from the raw edges of my pain, and he'd lie and say his father was just going through some things, a flimsy excuse for indefensible behavior, and we'd hang up, both of us lonelier than before. The weight of his silence, the unspoken truth, was almost unbearable. Then, one morning in mid-June, an envelope arrived that would burn through the suffocating fog of my grief and ignite a fire I thought had long been extinguished. It was addressed simply to Evelyn Hayes, my maiden name, a name I hadn't seen in print in years, not since before I married Daniel, and my identity had been, willingly, subsumed into his. It was printed on a heavy, almost offensively cheerful, cream-colored cardstock, the kind one uses for a high-end wedding invitation, implying celebration and blissful new beginnings. But this was no invitation. It was a formal, elegantly scripted eviction notice for my own life, a brazen declaration of victory from their side. I opened it with trembling fingers, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Dear Evelyn, it began, the handwriting of feminine, loopy script that I instinctively despised, radiating an air of smug self-satisfaction and utter disregard. I hope this letter finds you well. Daniel and I are so excited to be starting our new life together in the house, and to do that, we need a completely fresh start. The house is filled with so much of the past, and we're really focused on the future. We would appreciate it if you could schedule a time within the next 2 weeks to collect the last of your personal belongings. Mornings are generally best for us, as we have a lot of decorators and designers coming in the afternoons. All the best, Chloe Miller. Chloe Miller. She had taken my husband. She had taken my home, the sanctuary I had so lovingly crafted, the very foundation of my adult life. She had tried to erase my future. And now, in a breathtaking display of brazen entitlement, she had audacious taken my maiden name, my identity, appending it to her own, a public claim to what was once mine, a final, deliberate twist of the knife. And she had the unmitigated gall to refer to the remnants of my 22-year marriage, my entire life's work, as a mere interruption to her fresh start with decorators and designers. The casual dismissal of my existence, my countless sacrifices, for the sake of interior decorating choices, was a blow that transcended mere pain. It ignited something far colder, far more dangerous. It was a spark of pure, unadulterated rage. I sat at that kitchen table, the very table where I had learned of my obsolescence. For a long, long time, the offensive letter lying flat and mocking in front of me, its creamy perfection a testament to its cruel intent. My tea went cold, the steam long vanished into the silent air. The sun moved across the sky, painting the kitchen walls with shifting light and shadow, marking the passage of time, yet I didn't move. My hands, which had been trembling uncontrollably with shock and raw grief, slowly, deliberately became still. The trembling didn't stop, it just migrated inward, transforming from the shudder of profound sadness into a cold, clarifying rage I hadn't felt in years, perhaps ever. They thought this was over. They thought this perfectly printed, cream-colored letter was the final nail in my coffin, sealing my fate as a discarded relic. They thought they held all the power. Oh, how wrong they were. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. For the next week, I moved like an automaton, a hollow shell of my former self, meticulously packing the life I had built into anonymous cardboard boxes. Each item, each framed photograph, each faded memory was a pang, a whisper of what once was, of a life now irrevocably broken. I rented a small, soulless two-bedroom apartment in a complex across town, a place with beige walls and a lingering, oppressive smell of stale cigarette smoke that no amount of cleaning could eradicate. It was a physical manifestation of how I felt, diminished, generic, and painfully temporary. It lacked any semblance of character, any echo of home. As I sorted through 2 decades of accumulated memories, objects imbued with the very essence of our shared life, I came across a dusty accordion file in the damp basement, tucked away in a forgotten corner, labeled simply, House. Closing Docs 2002. My first instinct was to simply toss it into the rapidly growing pile of discards, to be rid of any remaining ties. What was the point now? The house was gone. But some nagging voice, some stubborn vestige of the meticulous bookkeeper I used to be, some flicker of ingrained order, made me open it. Inside, nestled beneath old mortgage statements and property tax receipts, documents that felt like ancient history, was a thick, vellum document with an ornate header, its heavy paper testament to its importance. The original deed of trust. I scanned it idly, my eyes blurry with exhaustion and the residue of tears, barely registering the legal jargon. And then I saw it. The names listed under grantees, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, Daniel Hayes and Evelyn Carter. My maiden name. A name I hadn't used, hadn't thought about, since I was 23, when I had so eagerly, so trustingly, shed it for his. We had never refinanced, never had the deed reissued. In his haste to build his grand new empire with Chloe, in his characteristic arrogance and almost criminal laziness, Daniel had overlooked the single most important document of all. My heart didn't soar with immediate triumph. It didn't pound with exhilarating joy. It just gave a slow, heavy thud. A quiet, momentous beat. I had no idea what it truly meant, not really. Was I in some kind of legal trouble? Was there some loose end I was still responsible for? I felt a flicker of fear, not power, a familiar companion in these days of uncertainty. But that fear quickly morphed into something else entirely. That night, surrounded by towering stacks of cardboard boxes in my sad, beige apartment, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic, I called my oldest friend, Sarah. We'd known each other since college, through thick and thin, bad haircuts and worse boyfriends. Now, she was a bulldog of a divorce lawyer, a woman who had seen the worst of human nature, the ugliest facets of marital collapse, and had never once flinched. She thrived in the courtroom, a true warrior. Sarah, it's Evelyn, I said, my voice small, barely a whisper, a sound I barely recognized as my own. Evelyn. I've been meaning to call. How are you holding up, honey? Her voice was warm, instantly comforting, a lifeline in my drowning world. I skipped the pleasantries, cutting straight to the heart of the matter, the discovery that had shaken me to my core. I have a legal question. I'm going through old papers, packing, and I found the original deed to the house. My maiden name is still on it as a joint tenant. What does that mean? I could almost hear the legal gears turning in her sharp mind, the precise clinking of facts and precedents, even through the phone line. She was silent for a long moment, a silence that felt both pregnant with meaning and terrifying. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice now slow and deliberate, laced with a growing incredulity. "You never signed a quitclaim deed? He never bought you out as part of the settlement. It was just an informal agreement that he'd keep the house." "We never got that far," I whispered, the absurdity of it hitting me afresh. "He just took it, assumed it." Sarah let out a low, disbelieving whistle, a sound that was half exasperation, half dawning, chilling delight. "Oh, that magnificent, lazy, arrogant fool," she breathed, almost to herself. "Evelyn, it doesn't mean you're in trouble. It means you are trouble. You own half of that house. Period. Legally, she is a guest in your home." The words hung in the air between us, electric, crackling with an almost tangible power. I felt a jolt, a current of energy, a surge of adrenaline I thought had been extinguished forever. It was not a grand, glorious feeling. Not yet. It was a cold, quiet flicker, a nascent spark of hope in the vast darkness, ready to ignite a wildfire. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice barely steady, but imbued with a new, subtle urgency, a steel I hadn't known I possessed. "The question isn't what can you do," Sarah said, her voice dropping, taking on that tone of professional delight, of a predator sensing its prey, that sent a thrilling shiver down my spine. "The question is, what do you want to do? We can file a partition action with the court. It's a legal mechanism to force the sale of jointly owned property when one party refuses to buy out the other. We can force an immediate sale of the property. And unless Mr. Hayes and his little decorator can magically produce enough cash to buy out your 50% share at full, current market value, they will have to leave. The court will order them out, plain and simple." I looked around my beige apartment, at the stacked boxes that represented my shrunken, diminished life. I thought of Chloe's loopy, arrogant handwriting on that eviction notice, a cruel irony now turned savagely on its head. I thought of the dismissive word interruption. A slow, cold smile, unfamiliar and almost alien, spread across my face. It felt strange, like stretching a muscle I hadn't used in decades, but strangely, profoundly satisfying. "Do it," I said, the word emerging with a quiet, resolute power that surprised even me. The next few weeks were a masterclass in legal strategy, meticulously orchestrated by Sarah. Our regular lunch dates, as I had once called them, transformed into intense, clandestine strategy sessions held in a quiet, secluded corner of a bustling downtown bistro, away from prying eyes. Over untouched salads and perpetually refilled iced tea, she laid out the plan with the precision of a seasoned general, anticipating every countermove. "He's going to come at you with emotion," she warned, her eyes sharp and unblinking. "Guilt is his primary weapon. He'll try to paint you as vindictive, as crazy, as unstable. Your only response is silence. You don't talk to him. You don't talk to her. You refer them to me. You are a ghost, Evelyn. An invisible, unstoppable force. Your only voice is the paperwork we file, the legal documents that carry the undeniable weight of the law." She coached me, hardened me, drilling into me the crucial understanding that this wasn't a marital dispute anymore. This was a business transaction. The business of reclaiming my life, piece by painful, yet exhilarating, piece. "You won't believe what happened next. Daniel called me 2 days after his lawyer received the official petition. His voice, when it came through the phone, was a chaotic cocktail of blustering, wounded pride and feigned, almost pathetic, concern. Evelyn, what is this? Are you trying to make me homeless? After everything we've built? What's the point of making this so ugly and difficult? His indignation was almost comical, a performance of aggrieved innocence, given his own ruthless actions. I took a deep, steadying breath, picturing Sarah's resolute face in my mind, her calm, unwavering gaze. I delivered the line she had given me, word for word, a pre-written script of power. Daniel, I am no longer discussing this with you. Please direct all future communication to my attorney, Sarah Chin. Her number is on the letterhead, and with a surge of adrenaline and an almost physical clenching of my jaw, I hung up. It was the hardest and, simultaneously, the most empowering thing I had ever done. The official court petition itself was a work of art, clean, airtight, and legally unshakable. We weren't making idle threats. We were making decisive, legally binding moves that would reverberate through their lives. Chloe, predictably, followed up with the long, rambling email, a screed of self-pity and astonishing condescension. She told me I was embarrassing myself, that I should have the grace and dignity to let go. This marriage was dead for years. Evelyn, she wrote, presuming to know the intimate history of my life, her words dripping with false sympathy. You're just holding onto a ghost. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the entire venomous email to Sarah with a simple, two-word note: turn up the heat. The silence from my end was deafening, a weapon more potent than any shout. One afternoon, a few weeks into this meticulously planned legal siege, I had to go back to the house to retrieve some truly important tax documents I'd stored in the office file cabinet. Documents Sarah insisted I needed for the inevitable financial settlement. I didn't knock. I used the key Daniel had forgotten I still possessed, a small, cold piece of metal that suddenly felt heavy with purpose in my palm. I walked into my own living room and felt like a stranger in a hostile country. The walls, once painted the warm, inviting butter yellow I had carefully chosen to complement the antique rug, were now a sterile, impersonal beige, devoid of any warmth or character, like a hotel lobby. My cherished family photos, the ones of James's first steps, of our anniversary trips, of Eleanor smiling faintly after a good day, were gone, replaced by generic, framed art with vapid, saccharine inspirational quotes like live, laugh, love, and good vibes only. It looked like a parody of a home, a soulless showroom staged for an imaginary buyer, stripped of all personal history. Chloe came clattering down the stairs, her movements surprisingly ungainly, in yoga pants and one of Daniel's old t-shirts, a t-shirt I had bought him for his 40th birthday, a sentimental gift now debased by her casual wear. Her face, usually composed in a mask of smug beauty and practiced charm, contorted in raw fury when she saw me standing, calmly, in the foyer. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice high and shrill, betraying a frantic edge. "I told you to schedule a time. We have boundaries." Her tone was a mixture of outrage and fear, the fear of losing control. I gave her a slow, placid smile, feeling a strange, exhilarating sense of calm detachment, as if I were observing a petty squabble from a great distance, a fascinating experiment in human reaction. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice dangerously soft, imbued with a quiet authority that vibrated in the air, a steel thread beneath velvet. "As long as my name is on the deed to this house, I don't schedule appointments. I come and go as I please. These are the new boundaries. You should get used to them." She stood there, speechless, her mouth slightly agape, her face flushed with impotent rage, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. I walked past her into the office, my heels clicking sharply on the polished hardwood floors I had chosen and paid for. She followed me, sputtering, her outrage escalating. "Daniel will not stand for this. You are being vindictive and pathetic. You're just trying to ruin everything." I found the file I needed, tucked away in the very back of the cabinet, and turned to face her, the file clutched firmly in my hand. He can stand for it, or he can be removed from the premises, I said, my voice unwavering, betraying none of the turmoil inside. It's his choice. As I walked out the front door, leaving her sputtering in the entryway, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom, "You're just jealous because he wanted someone better, someone younger, someone who isn't used up." I paused on the porch, my hand on the doorknob, and looked her dead in the eye, taking in her youthful anger, her foolish, misguided confidence, her desperate, predictable attempt to wound. "Better is a matter of opinion," I said, my voice calm, almost meditative. "Ownership is a matter of law. You should have hired a lawyer before you hired a moving van." And with that, I closed the door, the click echoing with a profound finality that sealed her fate. That night, Sarah called. The court had accepted our petition. A judge had signed the order. The clock was now officially ticking. They had 60 days to either produce hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy me out of my rightful 50% share or vacate the property so it could be sold by a court-appointed realtor. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that they couldn't do it. My secret ally, James, had confirmed it. His loyalty had finally, painfully, shifted, swayed not by my pleas, but by his father's transparent selfishness and cruelty, his increasingly obvious disregard for anything but his own immediate gratification. He'd come over for dinner a week prior, his face pale with distress, his young eyes troubled, the light seemingly dimmed. "Mom," he'd said, his voice low and heavy, I saw Dad's credit card statements. He took them on a trip to St. Bart's. "Chloe bought a $2,000 designer handbag. There's no money. They're living off his commission checks, and his sales are down. He's already stretched thin, barely making ends meet." He was my son, and I hated that he was caught in the middle of this painful battle, hated the burden he carried, but his information was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle I needed to complete my strategy. The net was closing. A week later, a cheap, hastily handwritten, "For sale by owner" sign appeared on the meticulously manicured front lawn. They were trying to do it themselves, desperate to avoid realtor commissions, desperate to maintain some illusion of control over the process that was now rapidly spiraling out of their grasp, completely out of their control. But karma, I was discovering with a quiet satisfaction that bordered on zen, has a way of balancing the books, of collecting its due. The calls started, first from him, then from her. They were a symphony of desperation, pleading, angry, and finally, tearful, their voices raw with panic. "You're ruining us," Chloe cried over the phone one evening, her shrill voice cracking. "You're humiliating us in front of everyone. This isn't fair." I paused for a beat, letting the silence stretch, before I said, "I'm sorry you feel that way," using the most infuriatingly neutral, corporate tone I could muster, a perfect echo of Daniel's own detached dismissal of our marriage. Then, without another word, I'd blocked her number for good. The silence that followed was golden. They couldn't sell it on their own. The house languished on the market, gathering dust, a forlorn symbol of their crumbling dreams, of a future they had stolen but could not keep. Their desperation grew palpable, a thick, suffocating cloud around them. Finally, a little over 4 weeks into the 60-day deadline, they were forced to hire a real estate agent, one Sarah had recommended to them through subtle back channels, a discreet connection that ensured our leverage. This, too, was by design. We now had an inside line to every offer, every viewing, every panicked conversation, every desperate negotiation. The price was set at fair market value, no lowballing allowed. An offer came in at week 5 of the 60-day deadline. Full asking price, no contingencies, from a young doctor and his wife who were excitedly expecting their first child, eager to start their own family in a place filled with good energy. I told Sarah to accept it immediately. The closing was set for 2 weeks later, the final, decisive act in this quiet drama. Daniel left me a final, rambling, pathetic voicemail, his voice hoarse with defeat, disbelief clinging to every syllable. "You're really going to let strangers walk into our home and erase everything we built?" he pleaded, clinging to a shared past that he himself had desecrated, that he had reduced to a discarded chapter. I deleted the message without a second thought. Our home? He had erased that himself months ago at a kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a casual pronouncement of my obsolescence. All I was doing was cleaning up the mess and collecting what was rightfully mine. The reckoning was at hand. The day of the closing arrived, crisp and bright, promising a new beginning for someone else. They had to be out by 9 a.m. I knew this because the new owner's movers, eager to begin their own new chapter, were scheduled for 9:05. When Daniel and Chloe handed over the keys to the new owners, their faces pale and drawn, etched with the undeniable reality of their downfall, they weren't homeowners anymore. They were just two people who had made a very, very bad bet, a colossal miscalculation, and the consequences had come due, brutally and irrevocably. This wasn't just a house sale, it was justice. He showed up at my new place, a small but peaceful rental with a balcony overflowing with vibrant flowers, a week later. The aroma of jasmine filled the air, a stark contrast to the stale air of my past. He looked smaller, diminished, as if the immense weight of his actions had physically compressed him. The expensive suit he wore, once so sharp and tailored, now hung limply off his frame, and his face was etched with the deep lines of sleeplessness and worry. His eyes, usually so confident, so commanding, now darted nervously, unable to meet mine, seeking refuge in the cracked pavement at my feet. "I came to ask if you could help us with the deposit on our new apartment," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush of profound, almost unbearable humiliation. He couldn't even meet my eyes, focusing instead on a tiny fissure in the concrete, a metaphor for his crumbling world. I just stared at him, my expression unreadable, carefully blank, betraying nothing. I let the silence hang in the air between us, a heavy, suffocating blanket, amplifying his discomfort, his desperate, pathetic vulnerability. "Excuse me," I finally said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion, a pure, unyielding void. I know how it sounds," he stammered, running a trembling hand through his thinning hair, a gesture of desperate anxiety. "But we're short. We never thought you'd take it this far." He finally looked up at me, his eyes pleading, desperate, filled with a raw, almost childlike confusion. "You never fought back before. Ever. I thought you'd be too tired." He was right about one thing. I had been tired. For years, I had been bone-tired. Tired of being invisible, of being the anchor, the constant, reliable foundation upon which everyone else could build their dreams. Tired of being a comfortable chapter he could simply close whenever he felt bored, whenever a shinier new edition caught his wandering eye. But tired isn't the same as defeated. Tired isn't the same as broken. Tired isn't the same as dead. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the story truly begins. "You made a miscalculation, Daniel," I said softly, my voice quiet but imbued with an iron resolve, a quiet strength that vibrated through me. "You confused my patience for weakness. You mistook my silence for consent. That was your error, not mine. You threw away everything because you were bored. And now, you get to live with the consequences." "Evelyn, please," he said, his voice cracking, the last vestiges of his pride crumbling into dust at my feet. "Chloe, she's a wreck. We have nothing." "You had everything," I corrected him gently, but firmly, each word a hammer blow of truth. "You had a home. You had a family. You had 22 years of loyalty, of unwavering support, of quiet sacrifice. You were the one who decided it had no value. You signed the checks, remember? Now you're learning what things actually cost." He stood there, utterly deflated, the last of his bluster gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant look. He had no more arguments, no more guilt trips, no more maneuvers left. He was checkmated. Utterly. "Good luck with the apartment, Daniel," I said, my voice holding no trace of malice, only a quiet, absolute finality. And with that, I closed the door on his shocked, defeated face, on his empty excuses, on our entire shared, now irrevocably severed, history. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel a triumphant surge of vindication. I just felt quiet. And in that quiet, for the very first time in a very long time, I felt the unmistakable hum of my own reclaimed power. They had tried to erase me, to write me out of my own story, but they forgot one crucial thing. The woman who balances the books, the woman who meticulously manages the accounts, is ultimately the one who gets to write the ending. And my new book was just beginning.